Okay, so hey guys, welcome back to Edge-CGI, and in this tutorial we're going to go ahead and have a look at grouping objects together, parenting objects together, an introduction to the outliner, and possibly we'll have a look at pivots as well. We might go ahead and make a separate video for pivot points in a separate video. So as you can see, in my left hand side I got my outliner open, and in my right hand side I got my channel box. And you can go ahead and get the channel box slash or the attribute editor out by hitting Control A on your keyboard. And the outline on the left hand side, you can go ahead and get that out by hitting this icon here. Okay, or you can go to Window and then hit Outliner, and a separate sort of little window will pop up for you. So I'm just going to go ahead and have it on my screen like so. Now your outliner is basically just a window to show you what's inside your scene. So basically you can see I got my 4 cameras in here, my default light set and my default object set. Now if I go ahead and create a primitive, okay, so a poly cube, and notice that my interactive creation is turned off. That's the reason why it pops right in the center of my grid. As you can see, if I go ahead and create any object, it will go ahead and show up in my outliner. So I can go ahead and create a sphere. It will give it a default name, and then it will show up in my outliner. I can also go ahead and create a NURB sphere, and it will, or a sub-D sphere, and it will show up in my outline as different object. Now we can also do the same thing with lights or cameras. Okay, so whatever you create or whatever is inside your scene, it will show up in the outliner. So now that I got these 2 objects here, let's go ahead and go through parenting and grouping them together. First of all, let's go ahead and think of what is actually a group. So if I don't have anything selected, let's go ahead and hit Control G, which is to group things together. And as you can see, it will go ahead and create a null object inside our scene. And a null object is basically nothing, it's just a node, and things are connected to it. So as you can see, when I go ahead and select that, you can't see that. Now let's go ahead and select both of our objects and hit Control G to group them together. Okay, and as you can see, they're both selected and our pivot is moved to the center of the grid. Now if you go ahead and click this plus icon on the left hand side, as you can see, I got my group node there, which is basically a null that we just went through earlier. And I got my sphere and my cube connected by this little chain to the group node. Now what that means is that when we go ahead and move this null object, which is our group, basically our 2 objects that are inside that group are going to go ahead and move with it. So now if I go ahead and move the group node, as you can see, our 2 objects will go ahead and move with it. Now if I go ahead and just select one of the objects and move that, you can see that nothing else happens. I can go ahead and move this freely, I can go ahead and move this freely, but if I go ahead and select the group node, they both will move together, they will both rotate together. So this is basically just a different way of parenting objects together. So let's go ahead and do the same thing, but by parenting things together. So let's go ahead and create a sphere. Let's go ahead and create a cube. Okay, and let's go ahead and go through parenting. So now these are my objects that are to get grouped together, and these are the objects that we're going to go ahead and parent together. So the first thing that you do when you parent things together is you select the child first, and then you select the parent. And don't get confused by these words. These are just technical terms. It's not like if you have 2 parents, they're going to have babies, and then you're going to have loads of children and loads of spheres and cubes that will pop out. It's nothing like that, okay? So it's just a technical term, but basically what you need to keep in mind that the child will follow wherever the parent moves. So if I move the parent, the child will move with it, but the child on its own can move wherever it wants to. But if I move the parent, the child will follow. Okay, so that's all you need to keep in mind. So the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is let's go ahead and make this sphere a little bit smaller, move it closer to a cube. And let's go ahead and select the child first. Okay, so I want this sphere to follow this cube, and I select that. Okay, and the order is very important. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift P, or P on the keyboard, sorry. So we hit P on our keyboard, and as you can see, what happens here in our outliner, we got a cube and our little sphere is connected via a little chain. Now, if you notice, our group is linked up the exact same way. So what does this mean? Basically, it means the same thing as what this meant. So now if I select our cube, and I go ahead and move this, as you can see, our child will move with it. If I rotate it, the child will rotate with it. But if I go ahead and move the child, as you can see, nothing happens. So the child can move freely wherever it wants to, but if the parent goes ahead and moves, the child will follow. So as you can see, between grouping and parenting, there really isn't too much difference. It's just a different way of hooking things up. Now, if you notice, I can achieve this exact same result as the group node by using parenting. So I can go ahead and let's go ahead and make a sphere. Okay. So I'll make a sphere here, and I'll make another cube. And I'll move that here. Okay. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and create a null object by Control G. Okay, and that's going to be here. Okay. And then what we're going to go ahead and do, we're going to go ahead and parent our cube to the null. So hit P. And now I'm going to go ahead and parent the sphere to the null and hit P. Now if you notice, if I open this hierarchy up, it's exactly the same as grouping things together. So I can go ahead and move our null object. Okay, I can go ahead and move my sphere, my cube freely. I can move a sphere freely as well. Nothing will happen. I can go ahead and rotate this and nothing will happen. Same thing, but if I go ahead and rotate the null or move the null or scale the null, as you can see, it will apply to both of these objects. So basically, parenting and grouping things together, the hierarchy or the chain system that they are linked up is exactly the same. Okay, so it's just a different way of setting up different hierarchies. Now, parenting, you use it a lot more in rigging and so on, and there's a difference between parenting and constraints that you gotta keep in mind. But basically, parenting and grouping things together is the same thing, or you can achieve the same result by hooking things up to the right place. Okay, but basically, I can go ahead and create a cube and create a sphere, and the main difference is if I go ahead and scale this down, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and duplicate both of these and move them over, and let me just get rid of these two nodes. So if I select this and group it together, what happens? It creates a null object first, and then it puts both of the objects linked up to a group node, and that group node will be in the center of the grid. Okay, now if I select this and hit P to parent them, now you notice that it doesn't create a null object. It will treat, basically it will treat this as a null object, sort of. It's hard to explain. And the sphere will be linked up to our cube. So now I can go ahead and rotate this, and that will follow. And the same thing applies to this. So if I go to my group node, okay, same thing happens. The only difference is that, let's say if this was somewhere else, let's say there, let me just get rid of this. Actually, let's go ahead and create a new one. So I'm going to move that there, and I'll go ahead and create a sphere. and I'll move this over here. And now if I select both of them and group them, as you can see, our group and node always spawns in the center of the grid. So now if I rotate, they don't actually rotate around the cube like it does with parenting. It rotates wherever the pivot for that group node is, which is in the center in this case. But we can always go ahead and change that. If I go ahead and select this group, press insert on my keyboard, okay, I can go ahead and move this pivot wherever I want. So let's go ahead and try to move it roughly in the center of our cube. So I'll move it there, I'll move it here, and I'll move it down a bit. Okay, so now the transformation will happen roughly wherever the pivot is. Okay, so that's all you guys really need to know or worry about parenting for now if you're a beginner. And later on, when we get into rigging and more complicated things, we'll look at constraints and how they work, and how you can use these sort of different hierarchy techniques or parenting things together or grouping things together. So I hope you guys enjoyed this quick tutorial, and I'll see you guys in some of our different tutorials hopefully. Make sure you guys subscribe and like this video if you enjoy, and thanks for watching.